Hello. I have a wonderful testimony for you, and it is told through the vehicle known as Datsi. This is Datsi. She was a 1968 Nissan, known as a Datsun at the time, 510. And boy, did we have a lot of adventures together. And she taught me a lot about faith, because there was not a whole lot that car could do except, run whenever it had a lot of mechanics working on it. And believe me, it had plenty. When we finally parted company, I'd had her for over 17 years, and she was pretty notorious in our community. I remember one time on Christmas Day, I was 35 miles away from home, and we broke down on the freeway, and when I got back, somebody told me that lived in the apartment complex I lived at that they heard that my car had broke down in Benicia. Now, I was in Vacaville, so that was about 35 miles away from home. And I said, you're kidding. Somebody saw my car on the road and you knew it before I got back with it? And they said, yeah. And I had to laugh, because that was kind of funny. Well, anyway, I probably put in 3 clutches. I know I had to rebuild the engine. There were so many things that went wrong with that car, but it was mine, it was paid for, and I was fortunate enough that I could walk to work. But nonetheless, car is a good thing to have, and it was back in the day when it was rainy in California. Now we don't even hardly have any rain. But it was really an eye-opening experience having Datsi. And I call this, Datsi, tithing, faith, a lot of things that Datsi showed me. One of the times when the clutch was going to go out, I was very close to home, and I was going over an overpass, and Datsi locked up, and I just knew, I was going to be on an overpass, and that was going to be game over. And I said, God, please, not here, not here. And Datsi went about another 8 blocks and died, just died dead right in front of the apartment I lived at. So that was kind of fun. Now, when I moved to this community, I wanted to know, what am I going to do? I was on my own. If I got a flat tire, what would happen, And I opened a letter from my aunt, who'd never sent me any money in her life, and she congratulated me on moving to this community and sent $15. Now, this was back in 1981, which was, a lot for her. She never had sent me any money at all before, and she said, get yourself something for your apartment. And I thought that was really nice, and I was reading this card and taking this cash out of the envelope in front of the apartment, and then when I started the car, it went thump, 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 because I had a flat. So I was about to find out what I was going to do, when I had a flat. Now, I did have roadside service. I think any single person should carry that. It's worth it. And but this nice young man came up, and he was about 15 years old, and he offered to change my tire. I mean, he appeared like an angel. It was really cool, and he was so sweet. So he put the spare on the car, and I offered to give him a ride, and I had $15 to get a retread. I mean, that was what was so cool, is I had the cash right there in my hand. And I said, thank you, Lord, you're faster than AAA. And, here's the money, so, but I wanted to do something for this young man. And so I offered to give him a ride, and as he got in the car, I accidentally ran over his foot. Well, Datsi was a very lightweight car, so, that was I guess, okay. And as it turned out, this beautiful young man ended up working at the same public library I did later on, and he's still there today, and he is an amazing human being and a wonderful father and husband, and just a good example of what every mom hopes their kid would turn out like. And he was one of 9, I found out, but he was so sweet, and I always appreciated him. Well, anyway, that was one of the adventures with Datsi. Another time, I had to have Datsi's engine rebuilt. Now, this real mechanic, he was a journeyman mechanic, said, I'm going to cut you a deal. He was a friend of my neighbors in the apartments, and he said, I'm going to take this car to Esparto, and I'm going to work on it. It might take me 3 months, but I'll work on it and I'll rebuild this engine when I'm not at work, and I'll charge you $1,500. Now, that was a lot of money back then, but to rebuild an engine nowadays would cost you much, much more. And he said, that car ought to run like a new car when you get it back. And I thought, well, okay, that's good, And so I had to borrow my mom's bike, and I was on a bike for 3 months. Now, the good part about that was I lost 17 pounds, and I needed to lose a little bit of weight. So that was a good part. But then again, I had an adventure in that my mother really stressed to me that I better take good care of that bike. It had 2 big baskets on the back, and I would go to the grocery store and I would buy my items and put them in the basket. And one time I decided to splurge on a 6-pack of Coke. And at the time I wasn't making much money. And so I thought, do I buy it? Don't I buy it? Don't I? And I put that Coke in the back of the baskets. And the little prongs on the side sliced the cans open and they all cut open. That was funny. But anyway, the lesson I learned was when I had Mom's bike, and I really respected it and took good care of it. And I would bolt it up to a big pole if I had to go in a grocery store. And there was a tall light tower outside of an Alpha Beta, and I tied the bike up with a chain and the lock. And I went in and I came out, and it was getting close to evening time, and I couldn't get the darn chain off. The combination wasn't working, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, what am I going to do if I come back in the morning? This is my mom's bike. There's going to be a wheel here. There won't be the rest of the bike. Stuff like that happens even in nice little towns like Vacaville was back in 1982, 83, 84, whatever it was. And so there was a man with a big Cadillac that looked like it was, as long as 2 cars that were regular standard size cars. It was an old Cadillac. He was a black man, and he had a big toolbox. Now this man was probably 20 yards away from where my bike was tied up. And I thought, I wonder if he has bolt cutters in there, because I could never beg, borrow, or steal bolt cutters anywhere if I wanted to get them and to cut the chain. And I was pretty much stuck. So I went over to him and I told him my plight. And I said, oh man, do you happen to have any bolt cutters in there? And he says, watch this. And he picked up the biggest pair of bolt cutters I've ever seen in my life. They look like something you'd almost trim a tree with, but they were bolt cutters. And he brought them over to the bike. And he says, you see this first link? And he went, and he cut that thing. And he says, now when you get home, he says, you look up that combination again, and you just go to the next link, and your chain's still good and all that. And it was like, oh my goodness, not only did I get to save the bike, but I also got to keep the chain I bought for the bike. So that was good news. And so he had some little kids that were his grandkids dancing around with him. And back in the day, they used to have thrifty ice cream for, I think, 25 cents a scoop or something. And we had a store here in Vacaville right there at the plaza I was at. And I bought the kids an ice cream. I wish I would have had more money with me, but I just didn't. And anyway, they were happy, and I certainly was. So that was, they always said from the pulpit, where God guides, he provides. And it seemed to be that way with Datsi. So finally, I decided, one thing after another, that I wanted to get a better car. I just needed a better car. Now, I was going to a church and I was tithing. And that's why, I pulled tithing into this adventure with Datsi, because this is really important. There were so many cool things that happened to me when I began to tithe. And that's when you give the top 10% of your salary before taxes to, your spiritual support system, which was a church I went to. And I knew that I couldn't get a car and make the tithe. And so what really kind of pushed me over the edge was it was storming rain. I was in Datsi. I was on my lunch hour, and I did live close, about 10 minutes on foot from work, but it was storming, and I had used the car, and Datsi just up and died. And so I was pushing the car in the storm. It was a lightweight car, so, and I was younger then, and I was really pretty strong. And a nice man stopped to help me, and he was on the way to a gas station, and he had a $20 bill in his hand. And so when he was helping me push Datsi to get it to the side of the road, the wind was blowing. It was a nightmare. It was raining, and it was blowing, and it was a mess. And anyway, that money blew out of his hand, and he says, "Oh no, my money blew." I mean, he didn't ask me for any money or anything, but I felt really bad for him, and he was just a nice, good Samaritan that was a victim of no good deed goes unpunished. And so when I came home that night, some ladies had said, "Do you want to go to a Bible study?" And I said, "You know what, I'm just discouraged because I need to get a newer car, but I can't give my tithe and make car payments." And so this lady said, "Well, you know what, we're having a ladies get together tonight. I'll come by and pick you up, and we'll pray about it and pray over you, and you'll feel better. You just wait. It'll be good to get out." Well, I knew it would be good to get out, but I didn't know if I'd feel better, because I was pretty discouraged, because Datsi was a money pit. It really was. It was just a money pit, but it was mine. And so that night the ladies prayed over me, and they said, "Do you feel better?" And I said, "No." I really was copping an attitude. I didn't feel better. I was disgusted and just tired of the car. And they said, "Honey," they said, one of them was from the South. She said, "Honey, if you can't afford your tithe and to get a new car or a newer car or better car, you're supposed to either walk or get that car fixed." And I said, and I said, "Well, I don't feel any better. I'm angry. I'm just upset." And I says, "What do you think?" They said, "When God wants you to have a car, you're going to have a car." And I said, "Well, what's he going to do? Is he going to make it pop up out of the driveway?" And they said, "Honey," he said, "Honey, God can make that car pop out of the driveway if you're supposed to have a car." Yes. And I thought, man, and I was just kind of considering the source, they were coming from a place of a better mindset than I was at the time, that was for sure. And it wasn't their car anyway. So, it wasn't their problem. And it's always easier to talk about other people, to other people about faith, when it's not the stuff you're dealing with. But sometimes when you've been through stuff, it's good to be able to share that you made it. Well, anyway, time went on, And finally, I would put the money that I had, the savings, into an account where I promised not to touch it for a year, and then they'd give me better interest. And there came a time about a year later, a year and a half later, where I had enough money to put a good down payment on a car, make my tithe, and make the car payments. And so I says, okay, Lord, I got 10 days. And I went to my desk and I was looking for the pink slip for Datsi, because I had to have the pink slip to sell it to the car dealer to get a new car and trade it in. And I couldn't find it. And I'd been out there kind of looking, and I talked to some of those car salesmen, and I'm telling you, the devil doesn't always wear red. You know, sometimes he wears a ball cap and a car dealership on his shirt. But I thought, well, you know what? The car's running. I looked in the envelope that said car registration. I saw my bicycle registration, and I just couldn't find it. And I said, I guess I'm supposed to keep Datsi, and I'm going to do it, because it's running. And I really didn't want to confront any beasts out there in car dealerships, because I didn't have anybody to walk with me and go through me with it. It would have just been me. And sometimes, you hear these stories about these people that prey on old ladies and dumb women, they think, when they try to sell them a car. So I went on to just keep driving Datsi. And it was a couple months later, and my mom was in town. Well, she was coming through town. She lived in a town called Vallejo that was about 30 miles away. And I would always go down to her house. Sometimes I would do the laundry or just visit, and she'd make a meal, but they didn't come up to Vacaville much. And she called me at work at the public library and says, Jenny, we're up in Davis, and we're going to be passing through Vacaville, and we'll stop by and say hi. And, so just go straight home, okay? And I says, okay. And, usually it was one of those deals where they come to say they've been and then they go. They didn't stay very long, but that was okay. I was happy to have them. And, it was always fun to go down there, because I could kind of just sit and talk, and, maybe they'd fix me dinner or something with their meal. And so anyway, I went home right after work, and I'll be darned if in the driveway there wasn't a brand new car. And it had a red ribbon on it. And I don't mean to cry, especially on a video. I feel silly. But it had a big red ribbon, and my mom said, Jenny, happy birthday early. It was my birthday month. She said, somebody gave me $10,000, and she said it was a relative, and she said, I asked Jerry, who was her husband and a wonderful man, my stepfather, if I could take part of that money and buy you a car, because she says, I know you've had a lot of trouble with your car, and I'm afraid you're going to get killed in it, and you're a good person, and you work hard, and and I'm telling you, my mother used to have a little restaurant, and she sold me her hamburgers. My mom used to raise chickens, and she sold me her eggs. My mom was very practical. She believed that people needed to learn to row their own boats, so to speak. And after I was on my own, she did give me free hamburgers, but she told me never to tell my stepbrothers and sisters, because she still sold theirs. But she figured, because I wasn't making much money and I was single. But what I'm saying is, for my mom to buy me that car was like, I said, that was the hand of God writing that check. And it was like, that car did pop up out of the driveway now, didn't it? And she says, Jenny, it doesn't have an air conditioner. She said it doesn't. And she says, so you can sell Datsi and get enough money to put an air conditioner in it. And she said Jerry insisted on a radio, and so it's just your standard radio. It was 2 doors, 4 wheels, and it was a Nissan Sentra. It was brand new. It was blue. And I got a bumper sticker for it that said I'm a miracle, because that little car was a miracle. And anyway, Datsi and I had many years together, and the new one had Alice Blue Fenders. That was her name. My friend Bev Marino named her. She said Alice Blue Fenders would be a good name. So that's what we did, was name it Alice Blue Fenders. And she says you got to go down to State Farm and you got to tell them, you got to get it's covered for 30 days with Datsi. And you got to, let them know and give them this paperwork, and I don't know, maybe pay a little bit more or whatever. But Datsi, this new Alice Blue Fenders was paid for in full. And I had to see what it cost in there, in the paperwork. And it was almost, I think it was something back in the day like $6,500 or something. And that was exactly, almost to a penny, what I had given in a tithe over the years. I got it back. And I felt like, Alice Blue Fenders came to me, and I didn't want to sell my Datsun. My Datsi, I wanted to give my Datsi to somebody and bless them. And I had a friend. Her name was Allison, and she was an English nanny. And when she came over to take care of one of the librarian's little boys, we became very good friends to each other, and we'd walk at night, and we'd laugh and everything. And I gave her the car. And for better or for worse, Datsi served him for a while. And she went on to have a beautiful life with her Prince Charming, Eon Millar, and they had some beautiful girls, and they even brought in 2 children they adopted from Haiti. So it was well placed. And I just want to let you know that God is faithful, and that sometimes things work out surprisingly well. And for me, they did. And that was the saga of Datsi, and how we built our faith together